Hey everybody, and welcome back to another severe storm film or weather forecast. In this forecast, we're going to be talking about more severe weather that could potentially impact anywhere from the Great Plains back into the Ohio Valley regions, as well as Hurricane Ernesto that is going to be going up the eastern Atlantic as we go in towards these next couple days. All the information you need to know right here. Let's start by taking a look at our overall weather pattern across the United States this afternoon. Here you can see as I'm filming this, we have showers and thunderstorms spread out across the central plains, back up into the northeast and back down into the mid-Atlantic states there. Some of those can be in the form of thunderstorms, but most of those are just those garden variety rain showers for this time of year. And as we go in towards tomorrow afternoon, notice that some of these storms could potentially be on the stronger side, maybe with those gustier winds, maybe some hail in that picture too. There is an SPC outlook, a slight risk for the day too for that area, so we'll need to watch out there. But as we go into Thursday, ultimately, this thing will likely be a lot more concerning than it will be these next couple days here. We'll likely have a pretty decent damaging wind spread across portions of Illinois and Wisconsin. Not expecting a severe weather outbreak, but it could potentially be in the form of a couple Boeing segments, maybe even some sort of mesoscale convective system that could potentially get going, but it would only be in very, very, very small in very isolated fashion. But as we go in towards Friday afternoon, notice that all of that energy moves eastward. I wouldn't be surprised if we got a slight risk across the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes, as well as back into the northern Tennessee Valley. We're just going to have to see how things like to pan out there. And then as we go in towards the weekend, notice that we're likely going to have some lingering moisture from this low pressure system that is going to sit over the Great Lakes for a decent amount of time here. You can see that right there. And on the western end, it's likely going to be bringing in some cooler air and potentially some showers there. Likewise, we saw last weekend across the Great Lakes, except probably a bit more widespread. But as we go in towards Sunday, as you can see, the Central Plains is very dry. That's because we could potentially be getting in towards a very dry pattern across the United States as we go in towards this weekend, which is called an omega block pattern. All right, so that means the plain states will likely remain very dry and very hot, while over here we'll likely have some cooler and rainier conditions as we go in towards the picture. So definitely a bit wetter over there in the eastern United States as we go in towards that time frame. But going into early next week, notice that we continue to see showers and possibly thunderstorms all up and down the eastern United States. Some of these could be on the strong to severe side, especially into portions of the southeastern United States. We could potentially see that gusty wind threat maybe, but it's too far out to distinguish where as of right now. But this model, it looks like it would be down in towards the southeast. But as we go in towards Tuesday the 20th, notice that we have a lot of tropical showers and thunderstorms across portions of the southeastern United States, while we continue to remain high and dry with this omega block pattern, while we continue to have a trough that is likely going to sit here, bringing in that cooler, more stable air for areas of the Northeast as well as the Great Lakes region. And same thing as we go into Wednesday the 21st, except things will be very uncertain as we go in towards that time frame. And it definitely looks like this omega block pattern could potentially linger for a little bit as we go in towards the end of the month, with cooler air on the eastern half of the United States as well as cooler air on the western end of the United States, while we have that warm, hot air surging northward on the southern half of the United States as we go in towards that time frame. Now let's take a look at our mid-level jet energy as we go in towards this afternoon here into our Tuesday evening here. As you can see, jet stream is pretty far south for this time of year. That's allowing that cooler air to usher in from the north, along with those perhaps showers entering from the north as well. And here's that severe weather threat going into tomorrow afternoon. it would be in those areas. But this afternoon, we're likely going to see it over here, and that's where that jet energy is. And it's not a big threat of severe weather, however, it will likely be noticeable as we go in towards this time frame. But as we go in towards Wednesday the 14th, notice high pressure system sitting down here in the Gulf of Mexico. And we continue to have this jet stream far to the south for this time of year. Cooler than average air spilling in on the east coast of the United States. And potentially hot air surging northward on the southern half of the United States. So definitely a big pattern change there, and it's going to feel very noticeable depending on where you are. But as we go in towards Thursday the 15th, notice that we continue to have this jet stream dipping down to the south and the east coast of the United States. Cooler air moving in again with that low pressure system and that trough sticking there. And then there's your low pressure system that's triggering your severe weather for Thursday afternoon. And then as we go into Friday, notice how that jet energy becomes very strong in the upper levels as we go in towards that time frame. Again, cooler air trying to usher back into the northeast. And then there's your severe weather threat for Friday. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if that was an a slight to enhanced risk day. And I also wanted to point out that notice this, all right? You can see here, there's that high pressure system, but notice the form that these arrows are making, all right? Look at that. That is an omega shape. All right, so you can see that omega block pattern is likely going to be coming in probably not far behind this next storm system that will bring severe storms for a couple days here. And notice that this low pressure system is likely going to linger over the Great Lakes for a decent amount of time with a little bit of cooler air, additional cool down moving into the portions of this region, so we'll likely continue to stay low and cool over there. And as you can see, there's that high pressure heat dome that is likely going to build with that flow over top of that ridge. Cooler air in the east, warmer air in the west, and that is likely going to allow those showers and thunderstorms to move over here as well, as you saw on that precipitation model. But notice as we go in towards next Monday, all right, a week from yesterday, you can see here that omega block pattern really starts to get its shape on as we go in towards that time frame with a really big digging trough across portions of the eastern United States. This could potentially be the first big cold blast we've had this entire season across the eastern United States, while over here in the west we are likely going to see some sort of heat wave, and it could potentially get dangerously hot in areas like the western United States, and it could potentially get pretty cool across portions of the eastern United States, and it will be very noticeable too, no doubt about that. But going into mid to late week next week, things become very uncertain. However, it does seem like this omega block pattern will continue, keeping things very hot across the west coast of the United States and things a lot cooler in the eastern half of the United States until further notice. And the next thing we're going to look at before we take a look at our short-term forecast is the temperatures for the next 7 days across the entire United States here. And you can see highs this afternoon reaching to the mid and upper 90s in some places down here in the deeper south regions, while over here in pretty much all of the United States we are sitting pretty comfortably in the 70s and 80s, and that is normal for pretty much all the United States this time of year. However, the southern half of the United States is well above average with their temperatures, to say the least. But going into tomorrow afternoon, that really doesn't change. As you can see here, a lot more widespread 90s, if that, maybe some triple digits as we go in towards tomorrow afternoon in Texas, maybe even portions of Louisiana as we go in towards that time frame, while we're continuing to stay pretty cool over here into portions of the vast majority of the United States. Again, very normal for this time of year, however, very above average and abnormal down here for the south for this time of year. Going into Thursday afternoon, you can see highs continuing to surge into the 90s and 100s across this area here, potentially potentially starting to surge into portions of the Midwest. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a couple readings of 90 degrees, perhaps maybe in the Kentucky, Missouri region there. We're just going to have to see how it all plays out and how far north this jet stream wants to lift, because we looked at the jet stream energy already and it really didn't look like it was going to lift that far north. But we'll see what happens here. And as you can see on Friday afternoon, look at these temperatures continuing to stay in the triple digits across Texas, Arizona, portions of California. And even then, we have 90s for highs over there. We continue to see the very comfortable air ushering in from the north again. Remember that trough that is going to be sticking around. And then as we go into the weekend, notice that those low dew points and those lower temperatures continue across portions of the vast majority of the United States. And while we have these triple digits and 90s back down into the south, Texas is definitely not getting a break, to say the least, as we go in towards the weekend here. And same thing for early next week. We could potentially get as high as 105 degrees in portions of Texas. I just wanted to point that out. And then we're going to continue staying high and cool across portions of the eastern United States. Again, remember that omega block pattern that could potentially start developing in the course of these next couple days. And then lastly, as we go into Tuesday the 20th, notice that we continue to keep the trend for 90s and 100s down here in the south, while the northern half of the United States remains pretty fall-like. All right, everybody, now that we're done taking a look at the long-term stuff, now it's time to take a look at our short-term weather. And as you can see, Storm Prediction Center has introduced a marginal risk, a huge one at that, for areas of portions of the high plains getting back into the plain states. And they've also introduced a small slight risk to include that higher potential for severe weather. And the main threat this afternoon and evening will be the threat for damaging winds. However, we cannot rule out an isolated tornado, especially in the slight risk region. So without further ado, let's see what the radar could look like as we go in towards the rest of the afternoon and evening. And notice as we go into around 7, 8 p.m. CDT, notice how we have a lot of thunderstorms starting to fire up across portions of northern Colorado, western Nebraska, and western South Dakota. And we'll likely have some stronger thunderstorms over here, but really nothing too out of the ordinary. And that's why that marginal risk is there to account for that potential. Same thing as over here in Missouri, maybe just some storms capable of producing small hail, maybe the size of peas or something like that. But going in towards 11 p.m. and then eventually into midnight, it seems that we might get some sort of storm complex that might develop in Nebraska and Kansas, and this would pose some sort of threat for some scatter damaging wind gusts. However, I'm not expecting gusts as high as 90 miles per hour like we would have had in Illinois that one night. Don't worry, guys, it's not going to be a derecho. I mean, at least that's good news, but we could definitely see some damaging winds from this as we go in towards the early morning hours. But now let's time out the thunderstorms for the daytime hours tomorrow. As you can see, the slight risk is to account for that morning complex that's likely going to be rolling through, as well as potentially a new round of storms that could develop as we go in towards tomorrow afternoon. So let's put this into motion here. Obviously, we get the storm complex to potentially roll across portions of Nebraska, and then it looks like we could potentially see a lot more intensification with this. I wouldn't be surprised that they added a slight risk northward, maybe with an embedded enhanced risk to account for that damaging wind risk, but I'm not Storm Prediction Center, so we'll see what happens. However, I definitely think we will see some redevelopment tomorrow afternoon, especially up here in North Dakota, South Dakota, thunderstorms firing in the early afternoon, and then our atmosphere is going to re-destabilize in the plain states, and then here goes the fire as we go in towards the evening and overnight. Another storm complex of storms in portions of South Dakota, and potentially another one producing maybe some hail and maybe some gusty winds as we go in towards the overnight. across these areas in the slight risk. That includes southeastern Nebraska, southwestern Iowa, northwestern Missouri, and northeastern Kansas. Alright everybody, now the last section of this video. Obviously we have to talk about the tropics here, and we brought up Ernesto when we were talking about our precipitation trends, so we're going to take a better look at that here. Notice how Ernesto is rolling over the Cayman Islands across portions of Puerto Rico, maybe even getting over into Cuba into these next few hours. We might get some outer bands there. But notice how much this strengthens as we go from today into late week. Notice 967 millibar low pressure as we go in towards Thursday into Friday. And then as we go in towards the weekend, notice how this thing continues to hold its strength as it moves north-northeast across portions of this area. Now you're probably wondering, why isn't it going north? Well, I'll show you why with the steering currents in a couple minutes here once we're done tracking this here. And notice how this latest model run does take it perhaps into portions of southeastern Nova Scotia, maybe even eastern Maine. I definitely think eastern Maine could potentially be out of the woods with this. However, I don't want to disregard it. You might get a couple squall lines, so we're going to need to watch that closely. Regardless, though, finally, it all says we'll likely get Ernesto out of here as we go in towards mid to late next week, and it hopefully won't be a problem anymore. So now that we're done taking a look at the GFS, now we're going to take a look at the European model here and how it handles it here. Notice as we go into late week, it doesn't deepen it nearly as much as the GFS does. However, it still deepens it, and it's a very strong tropical storm, maybe even a low-end hurricane. And as it rolls up the eastern Atlantic, notice that the GFS had it a bit further west and north as we go in towards next weekend. Instead of it going up into portions of southeastern Nova Scotia, the European model likes to take it out to sea, and therefore it just becoming a fish storm. All right, these two samples are the two possible scenarios we could have with this. All right, one is that it gets hit in Nova Scotia, or two, it goes out to sea like this is, like the European model is showing here. All right, so that all has to do with the steering current. So let's take a look at those right now. All right, folks, now let's take a peek quickly at the steering current steering this hurricane, and notice how we have a high pressure system sitting out here. This is usually called the Bermuda High, but it's very far east for this time of year, and it's likely going to catch a ride with that and basically circulate around it. All right, so that's why we already saw it going around into portions there. I definitely see the European model, what it's hinting at. The further east the high pressure system is, the more likelihood it's going to shift out to sea. However, if it's just a smidge west, that'll take it right up into portions of Nova Scotia. So we're going to need to continue to monitor trends as we get closer to this time frame of late this week. Now, this is what I'm talking about, folks. The European model, like I said, had this high-pressure system a bit further east than this GFS does by the time we go into this time frame, and it could potentially be bringing in another high-pressure ridge that could potentially have that clockwise flow. You know, a high-pressure system has a clockwise motion, so it would likely spin around, and that flow will just be northwest of it, and it could potentially take a ride. So we're going to need to monitor Finland as well as Nova Scotia, and potentially have to watch this for further updates. But for now, folks, thank you so much for watching. That's all I had for today. Make sure you like and subscribe, and have a great rest of your day.